This bird weighs less than a cup of water, yet it flew over the Pacific Ocean for 11 days straight, without touching land or wave, without a single bite of food or a single sip of water. 8,400 miles without one landing, burning nothing but its own body fat. And the most incredible part, it was only 5 months old. It flew this journey across half the world for the very first time, alone, with no adults, and it found the way by itself. How a navigator that works flawlessly over the vast empty ocean fits inside its little head, scientists still cannot explain. This is the bar-tailed godwit, and it doesn't look like a long-distance champion at all. A modest wading bird with thin legs and a long, slightly upturned bill, poking around in the mud, right at the water's edge. Walk past it on the shore, and you wouldn't even notice it. Yet this plain little bird makes one of the most incredible journeys on Earth. In the fall of 2022 in Alaska, scientists caught a young bird and attached a satellite tag to its back, weighing just 5 grams, less than a teaspoon of sugar. It had to be fastened so it wouldn't bother a bird that piles on a huge store of fat before the trip, then burns off nearly half of itself in a single flight. They named it by its tag number, B6. All summer long, B6 simply ate, day after day, as if its body knew that soon every extra gram would give it one more chance to survive. And on the 13th of October, it lifted off from Alaska and flew not along the safe edge of the coast, but straight out into the ocean, where for many days there would be nothing beneath it but water. 11 days later, it came down 8,400 miles from the start, in northeastern Tasmania, almost on the other side of the planet. This is the longest nonstop flight ever tracked in any living creature on Earth. In one single flight, the bird covered nearly a third of the way around the globe, like crossing the Atlantic from London to New York 2.5 times in a row, and all of it without once coming down onto solid ground, more than 35 miles an hour. And this tiny thing holds that pace for 265 hours without stopping. Picture a car that drives for 11 days with no stops and no refueling and isn't allowed to stall, except this car weighs a few hundred grams and stays up on 2 fragile wings. And B6 was not some random freak of nature. Back in 2007, the record was set by another bird of the same kind, a female called E7, who flew almost 7,300 miles without stopping. Then her record was broken again and again. What we're looking at isn't a lone hero, but a whole species that repeats the impossible every year right on schedule. The godwit flies this far not out of love for wandering. The short Arctic summer turns the Alaskan tundra into a giant incubator of life for a few weeks. The sun barely sets, insects rise in clouds, there's enough food to raise young around the clock, and there are almost no predators. You won't find a better nursery on the planet. But then, the cold comes, and the Arctic shuts down. The food vanishes under the snow, the ground freezes. Staying is not an option, and the bird heads south to warm shores where there's food all winter. Only it can't stay there for good either. In the south, it merely visits and feeds, while its young can be raised only in the Arctic tundra. So every spring, it's pulled north again, and this circle repeats year after year all its life. The godwit has almost no childhood as we know it. The chick climbs out of the egg, and within a day, it's not a helpless ball of fluff, but a self-reliant little one that finds its own food. It has only a few weeks to grow to adult size, grow its flight feathers, and get its tiny body ready to cross the ocean. 5 months sounds almost unbelievable. A human baby at that age is only just learning to sit up, while this bird is already crossing the Pacific on its own. But why? Over those 11 days, did B6 never take a single break, with a whole ocean right beneath it? A gull or an albatross can calmly land on a wave, rest, bob on the water, and take off again. The godwit can't do that. It has no webbing on its feet, and its feathers aren't protected from water the way a seabird's are. If it settles onto a wave, it will never rise back into the air. Below it isn't a resting place, but thousands of miles where there's no island, no shoal, no scrap of land to sit down on, even for a minute. Only flying, beat after beat, day and night until a shore finally appears ahead. To survive such a test, the godwit stops being an ordinary bird ahead of time. It literally rebuilds itself for the flight. By departure, it takes on so much fat that it becomes almost twice as heavy as usual. This is no longer just a bird with a reserve, it's a living fuel tank with wings, where more than half its weight is pure fuel. Every gram of fat means extra miles of the journey over the ocean. And to make room for that store, the body starts sacrificing itself. Everything not needed in the air shrinks down: the stomach, the liver, the kidneys, the intestines. The whole digestive system goes quiet and shrivels many times over. There's nothing to eat over the ocean anyway, so the body cares more about flying than digesting. The heart and chest muscles, on the other hand, fill with strength. Right in mid-flight, they can grow larger to pump more blood and keep the wings from tiring over all those 11 days. The bird can't get water either, and part of its moisture the body draws straight from the same fat it burns for energy. And it rests, it seems, without ever stopping its flight. One half of the brain drops into a brief sleep while the other holds the course, the way frigate birds do, sleeping right in mid-flight over the ocean. And only when a shore finally appears ahead does the reverse miracle begin. The drained, burned-out body grows back everything it sacrificed for the flight. But the most astonishing thing in this story isn't even that B6 endured the journey. The most astonishing thing is that it knew where to fly. It had no map, no memory of a past flight, no experienced bird ahead to simply follow. Young godwits set off on their own, in separate flocks, after the adults have already left. And still, it didn't lose its way, didn't circle over the water, didn't turn back. It covered all 8,000 miles and came out exactly at a distant land. It wasn't recalling the route because it had never seen it, yet it behaved as if the path had been written into it before birth. Somewhere inside that tiny skull, a set of instructions was already in place: when to take off, which way to hold the course, how long to keep it, and where to look for land after 11 days of emptiness. And this inborn program works over the open ocean where there isn't a single earthly landmark, no road, no mountain, no line of coast to catch the eye. How such knowledge fits inside a living creature is something scientists are still puzzling over, and what they have managed to find out has turned out to be far stranger than a simple compass. The godwit flies as if in several worlds at once. Over the ocean we see only clouds, waves, and an empty horizon, but it reads the sun, the stars, the wind, an inner clock, and the invisible lines of the Earth's magnetic field, all at the same time. Scientists looked for this built-in compass and first peered into the bird's eyes. And not for nothing. In its eye, there are special cells that respond not only to light, but also to the planet's magnetic field. To us, the magnetic field is an abstraction from a textbook. To the bird, it may be part of the scenery, as if an invisible grid were stretched over the sky and the water, and the godwit reads it as easily as we read road signs. It's guided by more than one compass, by a whole backup system, by day, the sun, by night, the stars. And when the sky clouds over and neither can be seen, there remains only the magnetic sense, which works even blind. One guide fails, and the next one picks the bird up right away. Where exactly this magnetic sensor is hidden, science still argues to this day. At first, they looked for it in the beak, and then in the spring of 2026, cells that sense the magnetic field were unexpectedly found in the liver, in pigeons for now. And the longer scientists search, the clearer one thing becomes. We see the result. The bird reaches the other side of the planet without error, but we still don't fully understand which sensors guide it across the ocean. And it isn't enough for the godwit just to find Australia or New Zealand. Many godwits return year after year, not merely to the same country, but to the very same shore, where they fed a year ago. If a storm throws them off to the side, they'll wait out the bad weather, gather their strength, and still come back to their point on the map. As if inside the bird, there's not just an arrow pointing south, but an exact address. So year after year, Thousands of godwits again and again conquer an ocean that would kill any of us. And yet, this almost impossible bird has a weakness. Not the ocean, not the storm, not the thousands of miles of travel. It's the shore. On the way back, in spring, the godwit can no longer fly nonstop. And here's why. In the fall, a tailwind carries it across the Pacific. The bird takes off not just whenever, but catches the right window, and then the ocean stops being an obstacle and helps carry it south itself, like an invisible river of air. But in spring, there's no such wind on the direct route, and flying straight across would be too dangerous. So on the way back, the godwit takes another path, along the Asian coast, with one single big stop on the muddy flats of the Yellow Sea, between China and Korea. From the outside, it's just mud, but for the bird, it's a huge living pantry. The godwit drives its long bill into the silt like a probe and pulls out worms, mollusks, and small crustaceans, turning the catch into fat, and the fat into miles of the journey ahead. There's no other refueling stop like it between the South and the Arctic. Almost the entire population passes through these shores in spring. And here's where the bitter part begins. People look at these same flats differently. For the bird, it's life, but for us, it's open space for a port, a dam, and concrete. Over the past few decades, people have built over nearly 2/3 of the Yellow Sea's muddy shores. And where godwits once fed by the thousands, walls and cranes now stand. This is not a threat from the future. It has already happened. Back in the late 80s, more than 100,000 of these birds used to arrive in this region, New Zealand included. Today, there are about 67,000 of them. In a single human lifetime, a third of them have vanished. Not from a storm and not from a predator, but because we took away the one place where they could catch their breath halfway. A bird that has conquered a whole ocean is defenseless against an ordinary excavator. Over its life, a single godwit flies more than 285,000 miles, more than the distance from the Earth to the Moon. But this entire journey rests on a few patches of muddy shore, without which it simply won't make it. Take away even one, and it's not a single flight that collapses, but the bird's whole life. And the entire species, which survived the ice ages, which learned to rebuild its own body and read the sky without a map, may very soon end up on the brink of extinction. Not because it forgot how to fly, but because it has nowhere left to rest halfway. So here's what it comes down to. 5 months old. A first flight across half the world. 8,400 miles over the empty ocean, and a precise landing on the other side of the Earth. The ocean doesn't scare this bird. The excavator on the shore does. And there's only one way we can save the godwit. We have to stop pouring concrete over the last mud flats, the ones that can't cross the ocean without.